In 2001, Paul Morgan created a website to raise money to get his feet amputated. But this wasn't going to be a legit procedure performed by actual medical professionals. He planned to do it himself, with a homemade guillotine, and charge people to watch it via livestream. Let's investigate. If you enjoy internet mysteries and generally disturbing content, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can become a Ko-fi member or a channel member to gain access to uncut videos and other perks, or you can leave me a tip by clicking the thanks under this video. Thanks to anyone who considers this. This video centres around a man planning to chop his own feet off. Viewer discretion is advised. You can click the link in the description to become a Ko-fi member and watch an uncut and ad-free version of this video, which features a whole extra story that was unsuitable for this cut. CutOffMyFeet.com was created in 2001 by 33-year-old Paul Morgan, who had been paralysed in an accident in 1986. On the website, there was some information about Paul, the accident, and his current plans. Quote, Paul Morgan, aka Freg, is from Biloxi, Mississippi. Raised in a large Catholic family, Paul, age 33, is one of 9 children. In high school, Paul was very active in ROTC and sports. His hobbies once included playing basketball and enjoying water sports such as fishing, boating, kneeboarding, and skiing. Because of his involvement in the ROTC, Paul was eligible for a scholarship to West Point. He was nominated for the scholarship by Senators Trent Lott and John C. Stennis. On August 24, 1986, Paul Morgan's life was forever changed. He was in an accident which left him paralysed. Paul and several of his friends had been out boating that day. They were on their way home, pulling the boat on a trailer behind the truck. Paul fell out of the back of the truck and was run over by the boat trailer they were towing. He spent 3 months in and out of hospitals. The injury has resulted in several back surgeries, as well as having a kidney removed. Paul's lifestyle changed dramatically after the accident. After much pain and rehabilitation, he has regained limited walking ability with the help of leg braces. Paul's accident partially severed the T12 in his spinal cord. This has resulted in partial paralysis from the waist down. Above the knees, Paul has working quadriceps, adductors, abductors, and medial hamstrings. The paralysis increases below the knees, leading to complete paralysis of the feet. He has feeling all the way down to his ankles on the front side of his legs and a dull sensation on the back side of his legs. He has no feeling or movement below the ankles. Paul Morgan is a man who desperately wanted to lead a normal life again. When the accident first happened, the technology was not available for that to happen. While the technology is now available for Paul to lead a better life, the financial burden would be much more than he could afford. Since Paul is on Medicare/Medicaid, his insurance will not cover the amputation and new prosthetics because it is not deemed a necessary procedure. Paul also receives medical disability, and his Medicare plan does not even cover the cost of his catheter bag. Paul doesn't want to fight a no-win battle with the insurance and medical communities in the United States. Paul is using this event as a chance to speak out against the lack of care in the medical field and the insurance industry. He strongly believes that this could make great strides in the much-needed insurance and medical reform in the United States. This amputation is simply Paul's way of saying that even though corporate America has refused him, he will get his new prosthetics and improve his quality of life. Paul and his friend, Kevin Nicholson, came up with the idea to charge internet access and cut off Paul's feet on the internet. By charging a small fee for the webcam access, Paul will raise the money he needs for the operations, prosthetics, and rehabilitation. If If you're a subscriber of this channel, you might remember a video I uploaded a while ago on a woman named Carol who also wanted to amputate her own limbs and created a website to document her journey. She planned to amputate both her arms below the elbow and replace them with Doran's stainless steel hooks. Unlike Paul though, Carol's arms were in perfect working order. She hadn't had an accident that had damaged her arms, and she really didn't have a valid reason to want to amputate them. It seems she may have had body integrity identity disorder, a condition where people have a desire to amputate limbs, paralyze themselves, or become disabled in some way, such as by blinding themselves. Alternatively, this may have been some kind of fetish for Carol or for her boyfriend at the time, whose ex-girlfriend also had amputated arms replaced with hooks. It's a pretty fascinating dive, so I'll link the video in the description if you want to check it out. Anyway, I digress. Paul's situation is very different. He never wanted an amputation until the accident paralysed his feet and left him with no feeling or movement below the ankles. If he could snap his fingers and regain the use of his feet, I'm sure he would, but since that's not possible, it seems that amputation, then prosthetics, is his only option if he wants to gain more mobility. It sounds like these prosthetics would significantly increase his quality of life, so it's really sad that he feels he has to go to these lengths to get them. I'm not American, but I've heard countless stories, even in recent times, of medical insurance not covering operations that would make a massive difference to someone's life because they're not deemed absolutely necessary. It doesn't sound like the situation has changed that much since 2001. I've covered a few stories on this channel of people performing self-surgery because they don't have insurance and can't afford it, or their insurance doesn't cover it. So it is a pretty bad situation to be in, but deciding to amputate your own legs with a homemade guillotine is a pretty extreme solution. Paul's friend Kevin, who helped him come up with the idea of charging people to watch the live-streamed amputation, actually had a different idea at first. He suggested that Paul place his legs on some train tracks and let nature take its course. I don't know if that would be better or worse, but for some reason Paul rejected this idea and settled on cutting his feet off himself. I guess this method did have the added benefit of allowing him to earn money that he could put towards his medical bills and prosthetics. The website had a section about the prosthetics, quote, "The prosthetics are the reason Paul is chopping off his legs. The new prosthetics will enable him to walk at a normal pace and to even run again. The prosthetics will provide more than just the simple flex of the ankle, which will allow me to run. I had tried that before with my present prosthetic bilateral MPAFOs years ago. I had the prosthetic provider fashion a swivel in the ankles of my present prosthetics. That provided me with less stability. The piston-type prosthetic which I want to attain not only has ankle movement, but the prosthetic is also rigid to stimulate muscular movement. The piston operation of the prosthetic helps to drive the lower foot attachment into providing me with the simulation effect of the contraction of the calf muscle and shin movement, thus allowing me to ambulate with speed. There are 2 steps to acquiring the prosthetics. First, Paul has to purchase the prosthetics, which are really no more than hydraulic mechanisms. Since the prosthetics fit the leg in the manner of a big boot, Paul does not need nerve endings to operate the prosthetics. Secondly, since the hydraulic feet have no cover, Paul must then pay someone to put synthetic skin over the prosthetics. There was also another page on the site for FAQs which provides some more information. Quote, "What are you going to do about server support? Aren't you worried that the server will crash with so many people logging onto it? We are as concerned about the server capabilities as you are. We are currently talking with several companies about handling the server traffic of the webcam. We are confident that we will be able to meet the server demands of Frex World. Since we have an actual number of users to work with, based on the number of people who subscribe, this makes it easier to plan to handle the capacity. What are you going to do with your feet after you cut them off? Would you consider an auction? I'm not sure if that's legal. In our initial planning, we had talked about purchasing human legs or a cadaver to test the blade of the guillotine. Unfortunately, it's illegal, a federal crime, to buy or sell bodies or body parts, so since an auction is not an option, but I like the idea, I guess I'd like to have my legs frozen. Then maybe one day medical science will find a way to let me use them again. What are you going to do for pain management prior to your amputation? I'm hoping that a doctor will be on site to administer a local anaesthetic in each leg to cover the initial pain. Later, at the hospital, further pain treatment will be administered if needed. Are you insane? No, I'm not insane. This is something that I've thought through very carefully. But for all of you who are still in doubt, I plan to have a full psychiatric evaluation done to prove I'm completely sane. Aren't you worried about losing too much blood or about bleeding to death? I plan on having medical professionals on location to stop the bleeding. We will also be using a Dr. Bovie machine to cauterize the legs. This is the same type of machine that is used in hospitals during amputations. How many people are you hoping will watch the amputation? I am hoping at least 200,000 people will tune in for the amputation. What's the wildest incident you've had happen since the accident? The wildest would probably be New Year's Eve in Biloxi. When we got to our hotel that evening, my brother realised that my shoe was soaked in blood. We pulled a nail out of my foot and I never even felt it. Do you think you will run into any opposition? There are always people who are going to disagree, but as I've said before, I'm doing this to have a better lifestyle. If someone has a problem with that, so be it. Paul mentioned in these FAQs that he planned to have a doctor on site to administer local anaesthetic and to stop the bleeding, and I was wondering how on earth he would convince an actual professional medical doctor to participate in this. But he actually later claimed to have secured emergency medical services for the event, so I guess he pulled it off somehow. Considering the legal trouble he later experienced, which we will cover soon, it's quite surprising that these medical professionals didn't anticipate such problems. Anyway, Paul never actually specified how much money he needed to raise in order to perform the amputation and acquire the prosthetics, but according to some estimates, it would have been in the region of $150,000. To watch the live amputation, you would have to pay $19.99 to become a member of Freck's World, which would also give you access to the following: Freck's newsletter, featuring interviews with Paul and his family and friends, and updates on the website and publicity appearances. Freck's chat room, where you could chat with Paul and other members. Paul would appear on webcam in these chats. Suggestion box, where you could tell Paul what you would like to see during the amputation. I'm quite intrigued to know what people wrote in the suggestion box for what they wanted to see during the amputation. Did they want him to dress up as Flash or sing "I'm Still Standing" while his legs are getting chopped off? It's all really bizarre, and it's interesting how Paul makes the whole thing seem so light-hearted when the plan itself and what led him to come up with it is pretty dark. He was relying on the morbid curiosity and perhaps sheer sadistic desire of others to fund his incredibly dangerous plan, and it seemed he didn't have many other options. Anyway, if the estimates of $150,000 is correct, Paul would have needed 7,500 people to become paying members of Freck's World. On his website, he actually said he hoped that at least 200,000 would sign up, and they'd also get to watch him build the guillotine. Quote, Paul is hoping that at least 20,000 people sign up to watch him cut off his feet. Prior to cutting off his feet, Paul will begin building the guillotine live on the internet. A location has been secured to build the guillotine. The building of the guillotine has started, and the process will take a few days to several weeks. And if you are a member of Freck's World, you can watch him build the guillotine step by step via streaming video. There will be several testing sessions as well, with Paul using sides of beef to test the blade weight and sharpness. At first, people were understandably skeptical about all this, but Paul actually started building the guillotine and posted a photo on his site to prove it, making it seem that bit more believable. The date of the amputation was initially set for the 19th of September 2001. When the site had first been created, it didn't attract a lot of attention, but Paul called into the Howard Stern show and it kind of blew up from there. Articles were written about him, people wanted to interview him, and by the 1st of July 2001, the site had gained 850,459 hits. Despite the interest, Paul wasn't making much progress towards his goal. Although people were visiting the site, very few of them were paying to become members. In fact, only around 20 people donated, and the total amount of money raised by the planned date of the amputation was apparently under $500. It's hardly surprising, really, considering most people were probably limited to the option of actually mailing him money. There was an option to place a credit card order through memberpro.com, but I don't think online payments were that popular back then. Today, creating fundraisers is pretty easy, especially with sites like GoFundMe. Most people already have their card details or PayPal account linked with their devices, and you can make a donation with the click of a button, but things were not that advanced and not that simple back in 2001. PayPal was founded in 1998, but it was still a pretty niche thing in 2001, so Paul didn't really have many options when it came to collecting donations. The closer he got to the amputation date, the clearer it became that it would have to be postponed until he'd raised more money, and so the date was changed to the 30th of November. It's worth noting that 9/11 happened just 8 days before the amputation date, so I'm guessing that also impacted the plan. After such a significant, catastrophic event, people likely weren't going to be flocking to watch some guy chop off his own feet. Paul had actually made a contest on his website that would allow the winner and a guest of their choice to be present at the amputation, including flights and a 2-night stay in a hotel. The rules were, quote, "This contest is only available to members of Frex World. All contestants must be 18 years or older. To be present at the amputation, the winner and guest will be required to sign a waiver absolving me, Paul Morgan, of any legal liabilities. Airfare and hotel accommodations for 2 will be provided. Travel will occur the day before the amputation, with return travel occurring the day after the amputation. All other expenses will be the sole responsibility of the winner and guest. Contest will begin when the payment forms are available on the Join Now page of this website. Frex contest is scheduled to close on September the 9th, 2001, with the drawing to be held on September 10th, 2001 at noon Central Time. The winner will be announced on the website after the drawing. If the winner is unable to claim this prize, a second chance drawing will be held. Void where prohibited." Someone named Jared Pylon from Pompano Beach, Florida had won the contest. I don't know what happened when the initial amputation was postponed, whether the prize would still be valid or if he scrapped it altogether. Anyway, the 30th of November came and went, and Paul had to postpone to the 5th of January, but yet again, it wasn't possible. He wrote on his website, quote, "I know many of you have been looking forward to the guillotine amputation of my feet on January the 5th. However, these are now the existing conditions. The upside: I have secured a production crew, EMT services, lighting, camera crews, director, live band, the video and DVD production, lighting, location, production manager, and, oh yes, the guillotine. The downside: corporate lawyers have caused me to lose several members of the crew, the satellite truck, and the initially interested investors who were covering the production costs of the amputation event. This being the case, the amputation of my feet by guillotine is postponed until the production money for the event has been secured. Many of you may wonder why I'm not using the sign-up money to pay for the costs. The money paid for memberships is in escrow until I perform the amputation. So I'm hoping to find an interested investor to help me get this amputation underway. I don't know how much more Paul could have done to draw attention to his site and gain more members, but his priorities were arguably a little skewed. He planned to hire a production crew, director, camera crews, and even a live band. I guess I can understand the DVD production, as that may have seemed like it had potential to raise a decent amount of money, but the production and camera crews were perhaps a waste of money. Anyone who was going to pay to see this would probably have been happy enough with decent enough footage from a camcorder. I don't think the significantly higher production value would have been a deciding factor for most potential members. The live band just seems totally unnecessary. If he wanted music, he could have just played music as it was happening. I doubt anyone would be particularly interested in seeing a live band when they were only there to watch him chop his legs off. Anyway, regarding the legal troubles Paul had experienced as a result of his plan, it sounds like he elaborated a little more, either elsewhere or on his site, but the archive for that specifically is no longer available. According to DesperateLiving.com, quote, "To make matters worse, the Stern interview had alerted the authorities to the plan and they were not best pleased. Apparently, just because America has a terrible healthcare service does not mean that you are free to perform DIY surgery, especially for paying viewers. Mississippi's Attorney General offered to have doctors in Jackson look at Paul's feet, an offer that was notably short of any sort of promise to actually do anything afterwards, and suggested that his planned amputation would be in violation of the splendidly named Mayhem laws as well as fraud regulations." Paul told the BBC that a surgeon had agreed to perform the amputation, quote, "The Mississippi Attorney General's office has contacted my attorney. They don't want the spectacle, so they've offered a surgeon to perform the amputation for free, but no prosthetics, no rehab. That's not what I'm looking for." Paul's entire plan for raising money for the prosthetics was that people pay to watch him amputate his own legs. If a surgeon did it for him, it'd be much safer, but he'd still have to find a way to fund the prosthetics, so he's still in a bit of a pickle. It's interesting that authorities did offer him this as some kind of compromise though. He clearly made an impact, even if it was relatively small. I'd be intrigued to hear in the comments your thoughts on all this. I think most of us will be in agreement that there is a problem with the system when someone who suffered life-changing injuries can't get surgery and prosthetics that would drastically increase the quality of life. While I 100% understand his reasons for it, I still think it's crazy that he planned to chop his own feet off with a homemade guillotine, but I also acknowledge that he didn't have many other options. Perhaps you could have argued back then that maybe the problem could have been solved in a few years as technology advanced, and once you chop off your feet, that's it. It's not like you can just grow them back. But who's to say his insurance would have covered the cost of future treatment anyway? As I said before, if you were in this situation in 2024 and you made a fundraiser to raise money to get your legs amputated by an actual doctor, you'd have a decent chance of succeeding. But GoFundMe wasn't a thing back then, and he knew he had to do something extreme to raise the money. So while I think it's awful that he was in that situation, and I can't say I totally support his decision to do the amputation himself, because it seems extremely risky, and of course there's a lot that could go wrong, part of me feels like it wouldn't be my place or anyone else's to stop him. They're his legs, he's not planning to chop off anyone else's. He must have known the risks, and he was still prepared to go through with it because he was in such a desperate situation. If the authorities had a problem with his DIY surgery, maybe they should be campaigning for better medical care that prevents people from being in a situation where they feel they have to take matters into their own hands. It's quite a fascinating moral dilemma. In general, I'm of the opinion that people should be able to do whatever they want as long as they're not harming anyone else. Obviously, I don't want harm to come to that person themselves, and I'm absolutely in favour of reforming the system to hopefully avoid these dilemmas, but ultimately, I don't think I have the right to tell someone what they can and can't do with their own body. Anyway, the final set date for the amputation was the 5th of January 2002, and after Paul's update informing members that this would only go ahead if he could secure the production money for the event, it's safe to assume he didn't secure the funds. The 5th of January came and went, and there were no further updates after late 2001. A few months later, the site was taken down completely, and today only archives remain. Paul seems to have completely vanished from the internet ever since. I wasn't able to find any information or updates since 2001, so what happened to him? I think it's fairly safe to assume that he didn't actually go through with the amputation. It was made pretty clear that he would face legal consequences, and it probably would have been in the news, considering his site was mentioned in various articles on BBC, ABC News, and various other sites. The whole story just seems to have been mostly forgotten about though. I guess there is a chance that he decided to do the amputation, but maybe in a different, less public way to avoid attracting the attention of the authorities. Perhaps he even accepted the offer of the authorities and managed to get it done properly, without the need of his makeshift guillotine. It seems pretty unlikely that he actually managed to raise the funds to do it himself though. He had to keep postponing the event because he hadn't received enough donations, and if it's true that despite his hope of 20,000 members, only around 20 signed up, he was around 19,980 members short. To put it bluntly, the whole thing was an absolute disaster. But was any of it ever real, or was it just a hoax, or even a scam? If you first encountered Paul's site in 2001, your first reaction might have been that it was a hoax. Enough crazy things have happened online in the 23 years since that it's not really that unbelievable, but the internet was relatively young back then, and to hear that someone planned to make a guillotine and chop their own legs off would have sounded pretty wild. Perhaps that's part of the reason why hardly anyone signed up to become a member. If this was a hoax, the reason behind it might be pretty clear. Remember, he wrote on his website, Paul is using this event as a chance to speak out against the lack of care in the medical field and the insurance industry. He strongly believes that this could make great strides in the much-needed insurance and medical reform in the United States. This amputation is simply Paul's way of saying that even though corporate America has refused him, he will get his new prosthetics and improve his quality of life. Perhaps he never planned to amputate his own feet, but by creating this website and appearing in interviews with this plan, he was drawing attention to the problems with healthcare and insurance. If that's the case, this wasn't just an innocent hoax though. Considering he was asking people to become paying members, that makes it a scam. It seems he only scammed around 20 people, but still, he hoped to draw in many more. I'm guessing there was some kind of clause in the terms and conditions stating that people who paid to become a member were doing so at their own risk, and wouldn't be refunded if the amputation didn't go ahead. Considering no one that actually paid to become a member has spoken out since, it's not even beyond the realm of possibility that he deliberately made the credit card payment non-functional, but if people mailed him money, I'm not sure how he'd return that money to them. I don't personally believe it was a scam. As crazy as Paul's plan was, people will do crazy things when circumstances drive them to the point of desperation. It would have been quite stupid of him to put himself out there so much. He called into the Howard Stern show and appeared in interviews. You'd think he'd be keeping a bit more of a low profile if he was trying to scam people. If it was a hoax to make a point, I don't see why he would have asked for donations and for people to become members. As I said before, that automatically makes it a scam, unless he made it clear in the terms and conditions that the amputation never was going to happen. But you would think that information would have leaked at some point, and while there is some speculation that it was a hoax, there's no actual proof of that. I think it's more likely that Paul was serious for some time, and he either realised it was a dangerous idea, or he was scared off by the involvement of the authorities, or he didn't raise enough money in donations, so he decided to give up. You would assume that if he was still prepared to see it through, and it was only financial reasons that stopped him, he would continue trying to spread awareness and raising money until he had enough, but maybe he ran into other problems that made it more difficult. It doesn't actually sound like he would have faced very severe legal consequences, as he told BBC in August 2001, quote, "The county authorities have also been in touch. They're not saying they'll arrest me, but they're hinting around that if they know where the amputation is going to take place, they'll interfere and put the kibosh on it. So the amputation may be moved to Canada. I'm going to need a pretty big trailer to get the guillotine up there." So I really have no idea what became of all this. Paul seemed determined to make the amputation happen no matter what. Then in a matter of months, he and his site disappeared, and there has been next to no mention of it online since, as if it had never existed in the first place. Anyway, although Paul was defeated, no pun intended, in his plan, I hope he did find a safer way to improve his situation without chopping his own legs off. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments, as well as any suggestions you might have for a future video. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Huge thank you to my Ko-fi members and channel members whose names are on screen now. I really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time in a new video.